They called my name for trash duty on Veterans Day while the mayor waved from a float. Name's Frank Matheson, 72X something, depending who's asking. The chill from the old courthouse vents bit through my sleeves, and I gripped the worn leather strap of a satchel that's seen more wars than most folks here have read about. Ever wondered what happens when a whole town misjudges the man shoveling their sidewalk? Every morning at 6:45, Frank Matheson walked the same cracked sidewalk past Penny's diner, coat zipped to his chin hat low over his eyes. No one ever waved first. Steam curled from the diner's vent like a slow exhale, carrying the scent of grits and burnt toast into the gray morning air. Frank adjusted the strap on his faded canvas jacket. The patch above the chest had been restitched long ago, crooked but careful. His boots tapped a rhythm against the sidewalk's frost-dusted seams as he passed the front window, where a line of regulars hunched over Formica tables. Inside, they sipped black coffee and thumbed through yesterday's newspapers. Talk was low and familiar the way it always was when everyone knew everyone and thought they knew enough. At the far end of the street, the library light flicked on. Erin Bellamy straightened the stack of return slips by the window before settling in with her notebook. She'd watched the same scene play out since August, the quiet man, the invisible nods exchanged between locals, the way the fog seemed to wrap around him just a little more tightly than it did anyone else. Today she noticed something new. Frank paused at the door of Penny's not to go in, but to look through the window. Inside, a man in a military cap patted his coat pockets nervously, eyes flicking toward the register. A few muttered apologies drifted upward. The waitress, Ruth, gave a patient smile and turned away, but not before Erin saw Frank step in hand, something discreetly toward the counter, and then disappear out the side door a minute later without ever touching a plate. She blinked. So quiet, so smooth, the motion seemed rehearsed. By the time Erin turned back to her notepad, the moment had passed. The man was eating. Ruth was pouring coffee, and Frank was already halfway down Oak Street. The routine resumed. Same route, same gate, same silence. Across from the diner, the old shoe repair shop stood shuttered, its sign faded to illegibility. A curl of newspaper rested against the stoop untouched for days. No one noticed, or if they did, no one cared. In Ash Hollow, Nebraska, the line between quiet and suspicious was thin, and Frank had long since stopped trying to correct assumptions. At the corner, Mayor Sanders stepped out of a parked sedan and adjusted the collar of his camel coat. He shook hands with two retirees loitering near the post office drop box. His smile gleamed bright, even, and just a touch too polished. "Mornin', fellas. Heard the planning committee's got a line on that old lake property," he said, casually slipping a pamphlet into one man's coat pocket. "Wouldn't it be something to turn that into a fishing dock? Maybe a few rental cabins. Good for tourism." One of the men chuckled. The other just squinted into the mist. From her window perch, Erin scribbled a note in her leather journal. "Mayor mentions lakefront again. Same phrasing as last week. Timing matches Frank's route." She glanced up just in time to see Frank cross behind the diner, head down, gloved hands in his pockets. Nothing urgent. Nothing unusual. And yet, later that afternoon, as the wind picked up and blew scattered leaves against the gutters, Frank returned home to find something new waiting. On the back of his weather-beaten mailbox, in black spray paint, only half smeared by the mist. "Move." He stared at it without reaction. No furrow of the brow, no sigh. Just a long, quiet glance. Then he reached into the box, retrieved a modest stack of mail flyers, a utilities envelope, one card-sized letter, and turned back toward the porch. His key slid into the door without a sound. No one was watching. except Aaron. From the library steps, jacket drawn close, she watched him disappear inside. Her journal was tucked under her arm, unopened this time. She hadn't written anything since seeing the graffiti. The word lingered in her mind like an aftertaste. But what stayed with her even more was the way he hadn't reacted. She tapped the spine of the notebook thoughtfully. Who was he really? And why did no one ever ask? Aaron watched him from the library steps, wondering why the man never speaks and who he really is. At the Veterans Hall, someone whispered Matheson, then quickly changed the subject. The bingo machine whirred lazily as the plastic numbers danced inside. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile hum over the folding tables and styrofoam coffee cups. It was Thursday night in Ash Hollow, and the town's retired rhythm had settled into another slow draw of community tradition. Erin Bellamy sat in the corner of the room, dabber in hand, though her card remained mostly untouched. She wasn't here to win prizes. She was watching. Harold, a silver-haired veteran with a tremor in his left hand and an ever-present Marine Corps baseball cap, was chatting with two others near the snack table. His voice was hoarse from cigarettes and age, but clear enough when it carried. That fellow with the canvas satchel, Matheson. Silence. One of the others coughed. Harold glanced around as if catching himself, then scratched his neck and muttered, "Forget it. Just thought I recognized the jacket." And just like that, the moment evaporated into the clatter of bingo chips. Aaron leaned back, lips pressed together. The name had struck something in Harold, that much was clear, and she didn't miss the way his hand had paused in midair when he said it. The next morning, a storm had passed through Ash Hollow, leaving puddles like mirrors on the lake path and darkening the bark of the cottonwoods. Frank, as always, walked with quiet precision. He moved like someone trained not to disturb anything, as if each step had to be earned. He was just passing the war memorial when a yelp rang out from up ahead. A boy, maybe 10 or 11, had slipped on a patch of soaked leaves. His ankle was caught beneath him awkwardly, and he was sniffling in both pain and surprise. Without hesitation, Frank was there, kneeling with the boy, lifting his jacket gently and folding it over his shoulder before inspecting the limb. His hands were calm, movements swift, practiced. He stabilized the boy's wrist with a short strip of cloth from his satchel, then nodded at him to stay still. It lasted less than a minute. But someone saw. A teenager on a scooter, local camera always rolling, had caught the whole moment on video. No introduction, no words, just the act. And that was all it took. By that afternoon, the clip was circulating on Facebook under the caption, "Silent Soldier." Erin spotted it while sipping her chamomile tea, curled up in bed with her laptop open. Her corkboard of strange small-town moments leaned against the wall nearby, newspaper clippings, scribbled questions, timelines. The footage was grainy but unmistakable. Frank's posture, the way he checked the boy's pulse without looking at the camera. The secure knot he tied with the cloth, not just precise but instinctual. Not something you learn from YouTube. Something you repeat hundreds of times until your hands move before your brain does. She watched it twice. Then again. The third time, she leaned forward and paused at the moment Frank stood and turned. His satchel swung briefly, revealing a faded rectangle stitched to the side. It looked military, but not like anything standard. Her mind turned. She opened a tab, typing Frank Matheson Military Records, Nebraska. Nothing. She narrowed it, Ash Hollow Veterans List. No entry. She dug through the library archives the next morning. WW2, Vietnam, Korea. Still nothing. The name wasn't listed in any roll of honor or archived newsletter. That afternoon, she stopped by Penny's for a coffee. The diner was half empty as usual, and Penny herself was wiping down the counter. You see that video? Aaron asked casually. Penny gave a half smile. I did. Surprised me, honestly. He's always been polite. Pays in cash. Never talks much. Ever miss a morning? Not once that I can remember. Back at the library, Erin sat with her notebook open. The clip paused on her phone beside her. She kept glancing between them, the movement, the satchel, the silence. It all felt like pieces of a puzzle she hadn't meant to start, but now couldn't put away. That evening, as she packed up her things, she glanced one last time at the screen. The faded patch on the bag still bothered her. She couldn't tell what it was too worn to read. But there was a shape, a faint line of stitching that suggested rank. Maybe something special, something off regulation. She opened her messaging app. Her thumb hovered, then typed, "Snapped this today." "You seen a badge like this?" She attached the photo, blurry but focused enough to see the outline. Then she added, "What rank is this?" and hit send. She snaps a photo of the badge and texts it to her ex, now serving in the army. "What rank is this?" The response text buzzed on Erin's phone at 2:17 a.m. That's not just a badge. That's a Brigadier General's star. She sat upright in bed, the glow of the screen illuminating her startled face. Her tea had long gone cold, forgotten on the nightstand, beside a half-read book and her notes. She blinked once, reread the message, and felt a shiver that wasn't from the draft slipping through the cracked window pane. A Brigadier General. Her mind raced through everything she'd seen so far, the quiet walk, the practiced movements, the silence that felt less like secrecy and more like discipline. She glanced toward the corkboard. At the center, she'd pinned a printout of the still from the video, the faint badge on Frank's satchel circled in red. At the bottom of her phone screen, another message appeared. Desert Storm Era. Elite Unit. That patch isn't even supposed to exist anymore. By sunrise, Erin was already seated at her corner desk in the Ash Hollow Library, a blanket wrapped over her shoulders and a fresh pot of coffee brewing behind the checkout counter. The public computers hadn't yet come online, but she wasn't waiting for those. She had her own laptop open, combing through digital archives, news clippings, and anything remotely related to Brigadier General Frank Matheson. Nothing. At least not officially. But a new message from her Army contact popped up mid-scroll. Sending you something. Not supposed to be out there. Parts are redacted. Don't share it. Attached was a scan of a commendation citation. The name Matheson F. The language vague but reverent. For extraordinary leadership under siege conditions. Direct evacuation of personnel under active threat. The rest was blacked out. She read the first paragraph again, then stared out the window. Across the street, the town's small newspaper office was opening. She scribbled a note to herself, then checked her watch. 7:46 a.m. 12 hours later, the library closed early for the monthly town hall. Erin tucked the printout into a folder and joined the slow stream of townsfolk, heading toward the municipal building. The hall was already half full, lined with rows of metal chairs and a podium that looked too polished for such a sleepy town. Mayor Sanders stood near the front greeting people with a practiced smile and stiff handshake. His presence was always sharp tie, just so blazer-pressed hair combed like he rehearsed it. Erin caught the glint of his cufflinks as he clapped the shoulder of a local business owner. Frank arrived quietly. No coat, just the canvas satchel over his shoulder and the same zippered pullover he wore on his morning walks. He took a seat in the back, unnoticed by most, or perhaps willfully ignored. The meeting opened with the usual agenda: pothole complaints, a proposed street lamp near the boat launch, and then almost casually, Mayor Sanders cleared his throat and addressed ongoing issues regarding private shoreline use. This town values history, he said, fingers steepled. But we must also consider property taxes, fairness, and modernization. There's a long-standing concern regarding unregistered veterans' housing on lakefront plots. He didn't name Frank. He didn't have to. The crowd stirred faintly. Erin, seated off to the side with her pen poised, narrowed her eyes. She noted the phrasing, the slippery dance around legality and suggestion. The back doors opened. A man entered, tall in a dark coat. His hair was silver, neatly combed, and his walk carried the deliberate grace of someone long used to being watched. Erin didn't recognize him at first. He took a seat near the center aisle, said nothing. It wasn't until halfway through Sanders's next sentence that the man stood slowly. His gaze swept the room once and then locked on Frank. Frank looked up. Their eyes met. Silence spread like spilled ink. The man, older but upright, eyes sharp, stepped forward toward the podium. Sanders looked confused, then mildly irritated. "Sir, we'll take comments after the agenda." The man didn't flinch. He didn't speak to Sanders. He addressed the room. "If not for that man," he said, his voice carrying with practiced weight, "I wouldn't be standing here. He carried me out when the base was burning." Murmurs flickered across the room like sparks. "I'm General Martin Kane, retired. I was there when Frank Matheson saved 23 of us, dragged me 200 yards through fire and collapsed concrete. I didn't know he lived here. I didn't know he was alive." Someone dropped their coffee cup. From her seat, Erin's hand trembled as she raised her phone and began recording. Frank didn't rise. He didn't smile. He merely gave a short, slow nod, the kind you give when someone says something unnecessary but true. General Kane straightened, turned fully toward him, and raised his hand in salute. Frank still didn't move. Sanders's jaw twitched. The room for a long moment was stone quiet. Then a voice, small, scratchy, came from the back. A man Erin had never seen speak in public. He was the real deal all along, he said. She ended the recording right then, knowing the story didn't need embellishment. The next morning, her video has 74,000 views. Caption: "The Quiet Hero of Ash Hollow. Mayor Sanders scheduled a veteran appreciation parade." Only 2 people clapped when Frank passed by. The school marching band was out of tune, braving the November wind with red noses and half-buttoned uniforms. Main Street looked festive only at a glance. Flags hung stiff from poles, paper signs fluttered on lampposts, and folding chairs lined the sidewalks, most of them empty. The mayor stood front and center on a small platform near Penny's Diner, wrapped in a scarf that matched his campaign logo. Frank Matheson walked near the end of the procession. No banner named him. No loudspeaker announced his rank or deeds. A few townsfolk nodded as he passed. 2 clapped quietly, an elderly woman wrapped in a plaid shawl and a teenage boy with earbuds still in. The rest either looked past him or didn't look at all. He didn't seem surprised. Across the street, Erin watched from behind the glass of the library, arms crossed. She had seen the view count hit 6 digits by now. The Quiet Hero of Ash Hollow had become a trending headline in 3 local papers and 1 national blog, but here in town things remained complicated. She followed from a distance as the parade dwindled and Frank turned down the road that led toward the lake. The air bit sharper near the water. A hush settled over his property, broken only by the rhythmic crack of his axe meeting pine. A neat stack of firewood grew beside him. Each piece split clean, placed carefully. The motion kept his shoulders straight, his breath visible but steady. He didn't glance up when Erin pulled into the drive. "Bad turnout," she said, stepping out with a thermos. "You still drink coffee?" He nodded once and kept chopping. "I brought it black," she added. "Figured I'd try again." He paused, then leaned the axe against the stump and reached for the cup. His fingers worn but precise, wrapped around the handle like it was something fragile. She didn't say much else, just stood nearby as he drank. When she turned to leave, something on the cabin door caught her eye. A plain white envelope, unsealed, tucked beneath the frame. Frank saw it at the same moment. He stepped past her and pulled it free. 3 words printed in blocky ink. "You don't belong here." She took a sharp breath. "You have to let me post this. People need to see no." His voice was low, firm. "Frank, kindness doesn't need proof." She stared at him, frustrated by his calm, but something in his stillness made her stop. Instead, she pocketed her phone and looked away. The wind carried in the sound of dry leaves scraping across gravel. From the road came the shuffle of steps, slow-labored. A man appeared at the edge of the drive, hunched in a worn army coat, gray around the edges like smoke. He leaned heavily on a cane and wheezed as he approached. Frank stepped forward instinctively, as if recognizing the rhythm of someone struggling through pain. The man's voice cracked. "Are you Colonel Matheson?" The axe lay forgotten. Frank took a single step closer. The man's eyes brimmed with something between disbelief and hope. "I didn't know if you were real," he whispered. "They told me you burned with the rest. But I saw you carry me. Near Fallujah. I screamed. You didn't stop. You dragged me through mortar fire. Then you were gone." Frank stood frozen, jaw tight, breath shallow. "I've been looking for you for 17 years. His voice broke. So did he. The cane dropped, and the man slumped forward, not in collapse, but into an embrace. Frank caught him, arms steady and sure, pulling him in tight. Erin stood inside the cabin, just beyond the frosted window, camera still in her hand. She didn't raise it right away. But then she did. And through the glass, she captured something she had never seen before. Frank Matheson was holding someone like they mattered. Inside a sealed manila envelope was a single photo, Frank in uniform, surrounded by 23 soldiers. Only 7 survived. The paper trembled in Erin's hand as she turned it under the desk lamp's yellow glow. Faces blurred by dust and sun and time, but Frank's was unmistakable, standing center jaw, locked hands behind his back. The insignia on his collar matched the badge from the satchel. Her thumb traced the crease across the image, then the edges of the envelope it came in, stamped with the library's archive code from 2008. She had been sorting old donations in the basement, trying to distract herself from the unanswered messages she'd sent Frank since the reunion. He hadn't been rude, just quiet again. A slow retreat. But this envelope was misfiled. Misplaced behind Old Town Fair flyers and water quality reports. She almost missed it. Alongside the photo was a folded letter typed crisp, bearing the seal of the Northeastern Veterans Council. A thank you dated 2 years after Fallujah. No other name but F. Matheson in the salutation. Erin blinked twice before grabbing her laptop and typing the number at the top of the letterhead into Google. The first result was a directory for the Army Personnel Center in Fort Belvoir. She hesitated only a second before clicking the link and requesting a virtual meeting. By noon the next day, her email pinged with confirmation, MAJS Reyes. Appointment confirmed. She didn't tell Frank. At exactly 3 p.m., Reyes appeared on her screen in a neat olive drab uniform. His voice was clipped but respectful. "We've seen the video. General Kane's statement. It triggered a retroactive review." "A review?" Erin asked, leaning in. Reyes nodded. "Colonel Frank Matheson was recommended for the Medal of Honor in 2006. He declined to proceed." "Declined?" she echoed, stunned. It's rare but not unheard of. His commanding officer filed it regardless. We only discovered the paperwork after the recent exposure. Before she could respond, a knock rattled the library door. Ben Whitaker stepped in, older than he looked at first, with a cane under one arm and a small box clutched in the other. "I figured you'd want this part too," he said softly. He handed Aaron the box, then walked into the camera's view. Reyes greeted him instantly. "Whitaker," he said, "your record says you were pulled from the impact zone by him." Ben's voice cracked. "And not just me." He eased into the chair beside Aaron and glanced at the screen. He carried Staff Sergeant Lowe out first. His legs were gone. Then Lieutenant Daniels, who'd lost an eye. I was third. He had a shrapnel wound in his side. We begged him to stop. He went back anyway. Twice more. Reyes nodded solemnly. Aaron looked from one man to the other. Why didn't he ever tell anyone? Ben answered before Reyes could. Because those other men had kids. Frank had silence. In the quiet that followed, Aaron opened the small box. Nestled inside was an old military-issue watch, its glass cracked, its leather worn soft. "My father's," Ben said. "He said if we ever found the man who saved him to give it back. Said it belonged more to him than to us." That night, Aaron sat at her kitchen table, the photo, the watch, and her notes spread before her. Her article, drafted and redrafted over weeks, waited in her inbox. She read it one last time. No embellishment. No quotes twisted for effect. Just facts. Just Frank. Then she hit send. The editor at Military Family confirmed receipt 10 minutes later. The headline would run at dawn. On Veterans Day, as Frank walked toward the town stage, General Leland Kane stepped aside and saluted first. The wind rolled off Ash Hollow Lake like a low whistle through a reed flute, cold, thin, and persistent. The town plaza, transformed by a makeshift wooden stage and a ring of folding chairs, held the careful energy of a place about to confront something long avoided. Flags snapped gently in the breeze, and Aaron could feel her voice tighten as she adjusted the mic stand. The mayor hadn't shown up yet, or perhaps more likely, he wasn't invited. Aaron smoothed the edge of her index cards, though she wouldn't need them. Her eyes scanned the crowd, older veterans in pressed jackets, children with crayon-colored thank you signs, Penny, the diner owner bundled in a wool scarf, with tears already glistening. Everyone was watching the same man now, Frank Matheson. He wore his formal dress blues for the first time in decades. The pants still held a crease. His shoes were polished, if a little scuffed, near the toe. And pinned over his heart was the faded silver badge, no longer a question mark, no longer hidden. From the edge of the plaza, he moved forward slowly, spine straight, stride measured. Just as he reached the roped perimeter near the stage, a young security officer stepped into his path. "Sorry, sir, VIP access is restricted," during a voice from behind, cut through the wind. "Let him pass." General Leland Kane, now in full uniform, emerged from the front row and raised one hand. The officer turned, hesitated, then looked down at the badge Frank was already holding out. The seal, the stars, the years. The young man blinked, stepped back, and stood at attention. Frank gave no nod, no smile, just moved forward calm as sunrise. He didn't take the microphone. Aaron had prepared for this. She motioned subtly to Kane, who approached the podium instead. "I once stood in a tent on the edge of a firestorm," Kane began. "The world was collapsing around us. Gunfire, smoke, screams. I watched men break apart. I watched others turn away. But one man, this man, walked into that storm over and over. The crowd was still, He didn't just save our lives, Kane continued. He reminded us what dignity looked like when everything else was gone. When he finished, Kane turned slowly. Frank stood at the bottom of the stairs, not yet having climbed the stage. Kane descended toward him, one careful step at a time. When their eyes met, the general paused, then shifted his weight, stepped aside, and lifted his right hand in a crisp salute. A hush swept over the plaza. No one moved. No one breathed. Frank stood motionless. Then finally, he lifted one hand not in salute but in gentle acknowledgement. A nod. A flicker of something softer behind the eyes. And then he climbed the steps. Erin felt her chest tighten as she watched. The mic was off. There was no speech planned. Yet Frank turned to face them all anyway. He didn't clear his throat. Didn't grip the podium. He just said, "I never wanted applause. Just peace." And then he stepped back. No one clapped. Not at first. It began in the far corner, one child, then a parent, then a veteran standing slowly. A ripple. Then the whole plaza rose one by one, not in obligation, but something truer. Their hands met in applause. Not thunderous, not showy, just enough. Erin looked around. For the first time, everyone stood up and applauded. Not because they knew who he was, but because they finally saw him. Sometimes the loudest grace comes from the quietest corners. Frank Matheson never asked for recognition, yet his silence taught an entire town how to listen. Kindness, when given without expectation, has a way of circling back, not with fanfare, but with quiet redemption. Like a lone light left on in the fog, it reminds us that dignity doesn't wear a name tag. If this story has stirred something gentle in you, consider passing that light forward. After all, the ones we overlook often carry the stories that shape us. Hoy ChatGPT.